Hello, everyone. I think we can start. The session's being recorded anyway, so people can follow up if they join in a bit later. Today is the last session of this whole series. You know, following the same pattern that we did with the previous sessions. There is going to be a recap at the start and then a few topics that we're going to be discussing. None of these topics are too difficult to understand or don't require much detail. So we'll have time to kind of slow down and go over each slide and I guess, each task one by one, and so that you fully, understand what's going on. Oh, sorry, there's another person waiting. Before we do any of that, though, there is one thing that I think would be important that was kind of brushed over in the previous session and would be good that we discuss it right now. So, we were discussing in the previous section, we discussed a few things. One was, creating or modifying rather items, things like lines, things like rectangles, circles, even, and then after that, being able to modify objects themselves, applying some sort of actions, parameters to those objects. So maybe you can, let's say if you have a table as an object, you can, or an entity, you can increase the length, you can add in more chairs around the table. You can, construct an array of chairs around a circular table and, so on and so forth. That is one of the things we discussed. The next one was focused on hatching and gradients. And there is one thing that we kind of brushed over at the time that I think is important to know as I was recapping on the previous lesson. I realized that one thing would be good to kind of discuss right now. So we said that in order to create a hatch, you can either go into the draw section and then the hatch option is over here, or you can simply type in the word hatch and that will allow you to create a hatch. Now, one thing that we glossed over is this button over here. So what does this do? When this is closed, okay, perfectly fine. You determine a pattern, you determine a color, or you figure out a color for your pattern. And then there is, all the scales, the angles, whatever for the pattern itself. So if the scale is more, the pattern is going to be more wider, and so on. And pick internal points, select entities. These are also that you can construct a boundary where your oh, someone's in the way now. You can construct a boundary where your hatch is going to be determined. The thing with this button over here is it helps you determine what kind of hatch you want to draw out. So by that I mean, there's a few of these island detection settings, I guess, which are important to know. So what does, this normal one do? Well, this normal one, as it shows over here, if I, and then we can, it would be good if we could demonstrate this. So if I click over here, it should hatch this entire um, I guess, section of the drawing, but then also every alternating section within that is closed should be hashed as well. So if we click over here, we see that it hatched this entire section, but then also it skipped this portion in the middle, and then the closed spaces within that portion, it did hatch. And it would do the same. If there were additional closed spaces within this, it wouldn't hatch them. And then the next one, it would hatch. The next one, it wouldn't hatch, and so on. Again, it depends on the way your drawing is set up, what you're trying to build, where, one thing might be more useful than the other. What does outer do? Well, outer is kind of not recursive, or I guess it doesn't call these inner hatches. It will only draw this outer one, and that is it. It'll stop there. If it sees any boundary, it'll inside inwards, it'll stop there. And then this ignore, well, this is pretty simple. Um, it'll just look at the external boundary, and then the internal one, it'll completely, even if there is an internal one, even if there isn't an internal one, it'll just ignore it completely. So yeah, don't really care about whatever's inside, even though it may be closed, it may not be closed. It doesn't care for that. So we see that, yeah, that is oh, and another person. No, waiting. Sorry. Yeah, we see that that is one portion of hatching that we kind of missed out on is boundary retention. Basically creates a boundary for the where the hatch is gonna lie. So again, there's a few, either you can create a region or you can create the type as a region or the type as a polyline. And yeah, that is about it from the previous section that I think was kind of important to know and something that should be remembered, should be kept in mind if you know face the need to draw hatches. And then, once you've set one of them up, let's say you want to go with normal, you've already selected these options. You can close this down so that you don't have to keep opening it up again and again. Or, the menu doesn't get the hatch and gradient option doesn't get too big. So yeah, that is it from the previous lesson, but we can move on to the current. Okay, so what are we going to be discussing today? Well, we're going to take a few minutes to kind of discuss texts, adding texts, multi-line texts, and dimensioning, adding dimensions within our drawing. We're also going to discuss adding tables, how to style those tables, as well as how to style the dimensions and text that we've added. The tables may include things that you just type out. For example, my name is Mustafa, but then I could also have it include certain properties of objects. So maybe I want the area of a circle, maybe I want the area of a rectangle, maybe I want the circumference of a circle. So you can kind of add all those in into a table and then display that table within your paper space or wherever you want it to be shown. External references, an important one, and quite easy to understand. I think CoreMCAT does it quite well, where there isn't anything too technical, too difficult about understanding what's going on with external references. We'll have a little session on what viewports, or I guess we've already discussed what viewports are, but we'll go into a bit more detail into how to maybe lock viewports, how to freeze layer within viewports, things like that. And then also have a bit on annotation or the annotative scale, or where you are enable a text to be annotated. And then depending on the scale that you're working with, it automatically readjusts itself so that you don't have to constantly zoom in, zoom out, and it fits within your paper space, even though your drawing might be too large. We're gonna have a look at that as well. And lastly, just a small bit on the page setup manager you have, which allows you to set up what your page is gonna look like in terms of the units that are gonna be used, etc. And using that, you can apply that to many of the layouts that you create or the paper spaces that you create and use those, once you create a page setup, you can use those in multiple layouts so that you don't have to constantly redefine, um, your setup in each layout. So let's start with the first one, annotating your designs. Okay, so you have, as we've seen with other tools as well, there is generally a manager and there is also an explorer. they kind of do the same, but they look a little bit different. So you'll see the same for using text styles. And by text styles, we just mean the text that you write, let it be single line or multi-line. What is the style for that? So by style, we mean things like height, maybe the font, maybe the gap between, if it's a multi-line text, what is the gap between each line? Maybe something about the angle, etc., etc. It's we'll see right now once we open up the text style manager what I mean. So let me do that right now. So over here, we can go into the annotate panel, and then we see in the left that there's this text style manager. We can also type in style, and it should open up the text style manager. You can do the same over here, and we see that there are a few settings over here that we'll go over. So this is where all your styles in your current model, in your current file are defined. So, right now we selected custom style. That's perfectly fine. We can create a new one. We can rename this or we can delete this. There's a few, for example, if you want to create a new one, it'll okay, let's not create a new one. Let's just modify this existing one or go over what each thing does. So annotative, we're going to be discussing this later, but it basically allows you to scale up your text depending on the scale that you select over here or within your layout space as well. So we'll see annotative this option being worked on later down the line. For now, this is the height that is defined for the text. So either we can have this as this, or we can have it at 0, and then when we're drawing the text, it'll ask us for what height we want, and we can adjust it, make it variable, depending on whatever we want. Then there's a few other options as well. Um, you have the ability to, and this preview is a good one because it shows you what's happening when you're selecting one option or the other. Same goes for the font, where you can select different fonts and have it in different styles. I think regular, bold, italic, the ones that you're mostly used to. And yeah, this is the text style manager. But then there is also the text style um, explorer. So what is this? This is the next slide, and this is mostly, I would say, this exact same thing, but it's just that it uses a different UI. So I typed in EXP fonts right now. You can also access this by going into tools, and then there is one of the explorers over here, this one in particular. And we see that there's a few, it kind of neatly shows us our entire setting rather than having to, like in the go into annotate, if you open up the text styles manager, we kind of have to go over each one to see what it looks like, see what it is, see what's happening. Rather, over here we see the entire thing, or we see the whole thing in its entirety. And you can, if you want to select a different one, we can just double click as we did with the layers to choose that as the current text style that we want to work with. And it's the same where we can create a new item over here, and then some default properties will be set, and then some we can set ourselves. So yeah, that is it for the text style manager. And then what it will do is, you know, I can once I have set up a text style, I can go ahead and create a text. Or maybe if I don't want to create a text, maybe I want to create a multi-line text, I can do that as well. You'll see that there are a few options over here. This is justify and style. Justify allows us to choose maybe, if I want to have the text be middle aligned towards the left, I'll choose ML. And then rotation angle, I don't want a rotation angle. and then I can type in, something for them, session 4, and so on. I can double click, and then this text is gonna stay there. And we see that the height is 10 over here. Had I set the height to 0, it would have asked me what height do I want, and yeah, that is about it. Let me delete this so that it doesn't bug us, and then we can move forward. The same applies for multi-line text, by the way, where you can follow the same, the way to generate a multi-line text is just click on the button, click where you want to place the text. You are able to align it as well, or I guess justify it towards whichever direction you want it to be, and then you can start writing, and then you can just click your mouse somewhere else and it will exit that area, and then your text is going to be there. So yeah, basically what I said. You also have the ability to, of course, enter these options dynamically using the dynamic input, and the way to do that is using dtext for single line text and then mtext for multi-line text. And that's about it for the textiles and the text itself. There are a few other annotations as well, of course. So we are going to go through them one by one. So dimension styles. Dimension styles, an important one. Again, these have an explorer as well as a manager. We look at the manager primarily because it's a bit easier to follow along with the manager. And yeah. So we see that the dimension style manager is over here. You also have the ability to type in style, and this opens up the dimension style manager. Or if you want to use the UI, you can do this as well. You see that there is this custom dim. This is something that I've created just to show you for demonstration purposes what's going on. So this follows basically all these dimensions, or I guess all these dimensions follow this setup that we have, this custom dim setup that we have. So let's go over it and try to understand what's going on. So, there's a lot of settings that you can, so it's very customized, very customizable. Mostly you'll see that the color, line type, line weight, all these things, I generally go with the layering so that the layering, makes sure that everything is in place and it is on that layer. So I don't get confused by the colors. Depending on your scenario, you might want it differently. So it really depends on what you want. All of these are options that you can try out. I'm not going to go through each one because there are a lot, but all of these are options that you can try out, and then it will show you the thing oh, sorry, it will show you the thing on the right as well, because the right type is a preview. So we'll say that there is this line section. So all these lines that are drawn, uh, these lines that you see on the side of, let's say, 122.25, not the arrows, but the lines. These are dealt with within this section. And then symbols and arrows, this is where the arrows that are extending out of the dimensions, this is where you can kind of have separate arrowheads. Maybe you can determine, if you allow separate arrowheads, this will get unlocked, and then you can choose different arrowheads for whatever kind of dimension you want. You can also determine the arrowhead for the leader. So leaders are we're gonna this is a multi-leader. What you see on the right, it's kind of pointed out for you. So that's good. The arrow size, of course, what is the size of an arrow? You increase it, the size of this arrow will increase. And break size is basically if you want to break a dimension, let's say two dimensions are overlapping, you want to break them in the middle. How long is that breakage? A mark is sort of, for example, this plus sign in the middle. If you increase it, it should increase the size of this. We'll see that within our drawing. And there's a bunch of other settings that we can work on as well. Same for text, where you can choose a style for your text. Sorry. Yeah, we can choose a style for your text, and then as before, you can adjust the color of your text. I generally go by layer. The text height is 10. I think it was because it was set in the custom style, so it's not allowing us to change because it's fixed within the style itself. Um, this is where you place the text, so you can place it maybe in between this line, maybe above this line, maybe below this line, and this is the vertical placement. The horizontal placement would be, for example, you know, uh, you could have it next to the first extension line. The second one, you could have it above the first line. You can have it above the second line, so on and so forth. And then there's a few options about the orientation. The fit, I would say just to keep this the same because this is what determines, this is like the most optimal way that it figures out that it figures out how your dimensions are gonna align within your drawing. So, try not to change it. Annotative, this is where you actually select whether you want your dimensions to be annotative or you don't want them to be annotative. Um, right now we're gonna keep this off, but I will show you what this means later on when we discuss viewports. And then, yeah, units, I mean, whether you want there to be a prefix, suffix, whatever for the drawings that you have, it's important. Maybe I want to add something like, I guess for linear dimensions, I might want to add Maybe I don't want to add millimeters. Maybe I want to add in meters, whatever. And maybe I want to add in something like length is equal to. Any text that I want to add, I will be able to do it here. And then alternate units. I can display alternate units if I want to. They're displayed in there as a bracket. So that is about it for a dimension style manager. We see that this is what they look like. This is the current one that we were working on. This is the mark that I said was in the middle of that circle. And you can define all of these using these sections. So linear will draw a linear dimension. So for example, we can maybe draw one from this point till this point. I believe this should be, yeah, 150. I should be working on the right layer. So let's go to the dim layer. We can also have things like align. So anything that is not, for example, this over here is gonna be, oh, sorry, this over here is gonna be, um, this is in a 90-degree angle. So we will use align for this case. There are other cases as well, where, for example, you have this arc and you want to be able to get the angle for this arc. And let me just readjust the layer. And then maybe you want to get the angle, maybe you want to get the radius, maybe you want to get the diameter. You can do all of that by, yeah. So either I want it to be this part, or I could also have it be like this in case that the outward area or the outward angle is what I'm interested in. So there are a few of these options that we have over here. And then also we have a few of these options where we can define the radius, the diameter, the central point of the circle, and then a jagged line, or I guess lines as well. And yeah, all of these are meant to help you out in kind of figuring out how dimensions work. Let's go back to our slides. Yeah, what we discussed right now, linear dimensions and then angular dimensions as well as, sorry, um, yeah, linear dimensions, the angular dimensions, the radius, diameter, etc. All these things are quite easy to try out using the UI. So I'd suggest yeah, following it along. No, it's nothing too difficult or complex to understand. What are multi-leaders? Well, as I said before, previously when we drew a text, it was just it didn't have any arrow leading up to it, but you can have that if you want to. This is how it looks like, and then having it work is quite easy. Let's say I want it to be like this. Oh, let me turn off. Yeah, I had the orthogonal mode on. It was only doing things in 90 degrees, but I can have it like this, and then it'll allow me to enter something over here, and then I can click out, and it's this is a text, and you can have this point to, let's say, a circle. Maybe. For example, over here, this is a multi-leader, and it's pointed to the circle, saying that this is circular, and helpful in a lot of scenarios where maybe your spacing is a bit too tight, and you want this arrow to be there so that you can point to the correct one without having to draw arrows manually. It holds it in one entire object, so quite useful, I'd say. You also have the manager for this. Um, Nothing too complicated, uh, but it allows you to define the arrow size, the break size. We've already discussed these. The number of points that you want. Maybe you want a bit more rather than just 1 or 2 points. And then landing distance is the amount of distance that it has once it reaches that final point, in a sense. And obviously, you can, as with the other text, you can make this one annotative as well. Yeah. Um, yeah. The way to access the multi-leader styles, basically the menu that I was showing right now is just to type in leader style within the dynamic input, or as we saw right now, we were able to access it from the annotate panel itself. So you can set up your own custom multi-leader style over there and then start using similar to whatever text style or dimension style you set up. Overriding dimension text, quite easy to understand, but maybe if I want a dimension to be a bit different, I can sort of do this trick over here. So, let's not call this millimeter, it was really great. But we can sort of do this trick over here where I can double click on a text on a dimension to edit it, and then I can say length is equal to, and then once I type in this left um, open bracket and then this right bracket, and then I type in meters. It automatically populates the respective dimension within that space. So, quite useful if maybe for 1 or 2 dimensions you want to add some sort of text to it and then don't want to add it to the top or to the bottom or whatever, but rather add it to the dimension itself. Somewhat useful, I'd say, depending on what your scenario is. Continue versus baseline dimensions. So nothing too complex to understand. All that these mean is, all that these mean is, there is, we see that there are these two dimensions over here. So they are starting at the same point, but they end at different points. And this is what you would call a baseline dimension, where you specify a baseline. So this would be the baseline, for example. This would be the baseline, for example, and then I can add in something later down the line, and it'll show it to me accordingly within this space. Same goes for, or I guess similar is the scenario for continue, rather than let me select an item. Let's say we want to continue off of here. It'll allow me to kind of, maybe I want to select this, maybe I want to select this. It'll keep on continuing off that previous one and chain it together. So useful depending on what scenario you have. Let's move towards tables. We'll try to be a bit more quick because I have taken up more time than I would have wanted with the dimensions. But with tables, very easy to understand. They are within this space as well. But again, if you want to draw a table, you have to come up with a table style, and then you have to draw the table out. So there are a few samples that we have over here. You'll see that there is this tables page that we have. There is also a command, of course. Why would there not be a command that you can type out that allows you to customize the style of your table? So if you type in table style, it will open up this sort of panel, and we see that there is a custom table style that I've created already, and we can go ahead and modify that. And very similar to creating a new one is you can have a direction for your table where it can be facing down. So the title is at the top, and then below are the headers, and then below is the data, or it can be the other way around. The cell styles, these are an important one. Now for each cell, you want to, maybe set the height, maybe set a custom height, maybe set a custom color, or maybe set a custom style. So for this, we see that the height is 14 for the title block, but then for the header block, the height is a bit different. And I've done that intentionally so that the title is a bit bigger than the headers, and then the data is a bit smaller than the headers, so that there is this level of hierarchy that's there. And within each one, you can sort of do a few other things as well, where you can set up the alignment. You can have, that this is going to be data, of course, for data, or if it's a header or a title, maybe it'll be label. Probably you want to keep it as label. And then over here, yeah, you can define how the area around that data looks like. And same goes for the header, same goes for the title. So important to, when you're building this, it's important to sort of go over each one, and then like go to title, go over each tab, fix whatever you want to fix, and then move on to the next one. But it's important to like follow all these steps so that you ensure that you don't mess anything up. And then the way to insert a table. Actually, let's go back to the slide. It'll tell us what that is. It's very, very simple. But adding a table, relatively simple. All that you need to do is either we can go ahead and use this table command. It will open up this pane, and we can specify what. Let's say I want this custom table. It'll ask me what the width should be. Um, let's set it to 120. And then the row height is um, the number of, I guess, the rows that you want depending on the text height that you specified. So since I specified 14, if I enter the value to over here, the height is gonna end up being 28, or maybe a bit more to adjust for margins. But that is the idea. I'll be able to enter in two rows of text. That is the basic idea. And then first row, second row, and then all other rows where the first row is going to be the title. Hence, I've selected the title. The second is going to be the header, and then the rest of it is going to be data. And then we can go ahead and then create a table, and then I can, of course, align it with a point if I want to align it with a point, and it will allow me to enter. It allows me to start entering things for it. If I want to um, enter something later down the line, say, and then I can go ahead, double click, or I can also press tab, which is uh, the, the it allows me to go from row to row, go over each row and then move shift rows as well. So quite helpful, and makes life a bit easier in terms of entering data within tables. Okay, these are an important one, so we will discuss them right now. What do I mean by appeal? Well, you see that this entry over here looks a bit different. Have I typed in this value manually? I have not. The way we get this value is, let's say I enter, oh, sorry, let's say I enter circle, Ignore the layer. I'm gonna delete this anyways, so it doesn't really matter for now. And then this one, let's remove the text. But what we do want is to add in a field. So let's say for this cell, let me drag this over here. What do I want to add? Well, there's a lot of options that you have. I'm gonna go with entity. I'm gonna try replicating the circle that we have above. So what does this ask you to do? Well, it asks us to select an entity. We have a lot of them over here. I am going to select this particular cell. Now we see that it shows us all of the properties that are there for this circle. I can select the area, I can select maybe where the center is, maybe I can select the circumference of the circle, the color, diameter. So like there's so many options that we have. I'm gonna go with area obviously because that is what I selected in the cell above. And then you can sort of go with what kind of style you want for the data that you have. And you can adjust the precision as well, depending on, I am not sure what I have set for the previous cell, but let's say we just go with a precision of 2 decimal places. And then once I click OK, we see that it adds in the value over here. So yeah, the reason why we see that the font is a bit different is because this is a header versus this is a data row. So that's why this font is a bit bigger than this. And yeah, that is about what I want to go over with um, tables. Of course, there are things that you can do. You can also like think of it sort of as an Excel table, and you can add in the sum as well. So if I do B2, if I select, for example, these few cells, it will sum them up and it will show you the formula as well, and it will show you, I mean, of course, the value as well. So yeah, important. There's a lot of things that you can do with the table, and you can, of course, I mean, depending on what you have, you can go ahead, you can resize a table, you can do a bunch of things. So quite a nifty, quite a useful tool that 4MCAT provides if you want to show some form of data. External references, quite okay to understand, I would say. Now, what are external references? Well, we are working on this drawing right now. There might be some drawings that, let's say I am creating an office space. Maybe a desk I do in one drawing, and then maybe a plant I do in another drawing, and then maybe a cabinet I do in a third drawing, and then in the fourth one, I kind of want to combine all of them together. Well, there's an easy way to do that, where you can insert references within your current drawing. And those references or those files that you have created, those desk files, those plant files, whatever that we've created, they are going to be used um, in your current drawing now, and they will look sort of like this, where the colors might, be a bit dimmer, I would say. But this is like, for example, this is an external reference, and the grip for it is a bit further away, but that's fine. But the idea is that this file actually is not stored within this drawing, or I guess this block isn't stored within this drawing, but rather it's being referenced from some external location. So if you are in a big office setting, maybe you have one shared folder which everyone in the office uses, and then you kind of want to reference the drawings from there into your current drawing. But let's say if an external drawing updates, let's say I add in another rectangle to the side over here, I can go ahead and reload the reference within this drawing, and that will update this drawing as well. So that will, once it's updated within the source location, it is also updated in wherever it is referenced, as long as you reload it. So let's go over the sites to kind of see how we go about maybe importing a reference. Yeah, as I explained, it allows you to import external DWG files in your drawing. There can be many reasons why you want to do that. Maybe file size is another one. Maybe the size of your office or the amount of people working on a project is another reason. But it has a similar um, to in order to manage an external reference, you have a manager, of course, who would have guessed. The way to do that is we go in this external insert panel, sorry, and then you have this manager over here. You can also go ahead and type in XREF, and that will open up the manager. We see that there is this one that's already been loaded, but um, you know, this is because this it's referencing to this one, but we can go ahead and attach other ones. And it's important to understand what is this path because this path will allow you to determine. Okay, let me explain. Um, if we select no path, then it assumes that the external reference is placed within the same location as this current drawing. If we select relative path, that means that it'll store that external reference relative to wherever you are at right now. If I copy over my drawing somewhere else, it's gonna be a problem if the file path, or I guess the directory structure is not the same in that other location. Or full path is where it copies the full path of that external reference. Maybe it is in C users, Mustafa something, something, something. And then it will copy over that full path, and then that will be how it references that external drawing. So depending on your scenario, you kind of want to you want to be specific about this. You want to be careful with this. And then the rest are kind of you know um, obvious. And the way you add it is you just browse for a file and you just select a file and you can add it in. There is also this option of binding. So detach, quite simple to understand. Detaches the reference from your current drawing. Reload, it reloads that reference. So if a reference has been changed, it will maybe say that it's out of date or something, and you can go ahead and reload it. Bind is an important one. So what does bind do? Well, bind inserts the reference into your drawing. The way it inserts it is a bit different. So what insert will do is it'll go ahead and it'll create the layers if they need to be created, and it'll add in the entire thing with according to whatever is there previously. So if there was a layer that already existed in our current drawing, and then we see that there is another layer within this, it's going to keep the current one, and then this will be the colors for this might end up being changed as well. Bind, what it does is it's a bit smarter, where it binds the name of the file. So let's say this was I think landscaping area was the file name. So it will say the file name and then the layer name to determine the layers for this reference that we are adding in. So you see that there is this distinction where one contains the layer name, oh sorry, one contains the file name as well as the layer name, versus the other just contains the layer name if we are inserting the drawing into our if we are inserting this external reference, external drawing into our current drawing. So an important distinction to keep in mind. And yeah, let's go back to the slides. So we've already gone over this, but XREF manager, we open up the XREF manager, and then there's going to be that insert button that we saw, or attach button, I guess, and that's where you can insert not just one but multiple external reference files. And yeah, oh, sorry. Clipping XREFs. So maybe I want to show, okay, clipping XREFs quite simple. This is how you do it. It asks you to select an entities. Um, Once you have done that, I can maybe create a new boundary. Maybe I want to generate a polyline. Maybe sure, you can go with rectangular, and I can draw it out over here. And we see that it has clipped this whole area, and now I can only see the external reference that was within this boundary. And the good thing is, like the thing I like about this is it also provides you the ability to flip that. So maybe I don't want to see this region, but rather I want to see all the other area for this reference besides this box that I've drawn. So it's gonna do that for us. And the good thing is you can sort of play around with it, move it depending on what your style is, or maybe you want to only show a certain section of the externally referenced drawing. You can do that over here. Editing extracts, you can do that either within the source file. So that's, I mean, the best way you probably want to do it. Where you can open up a source file, um, or I guess for this, we would open up landscaping area, maybe make some edits to it, and then once we open up the XREF manager, it'll give us the ability to reload it, so that we stay up to date. But there is also the option of editing an XREF uh, edit reference in place. But that is very limited. I don't like it too much, where you can maybe delete items, maybe you can add in other items, but I'd rather open the drawing up in a separate area and then do the editing over there. So something to keep in mind. It allows you to edit the references in place, so you won't be taken to anywhere else, or rather you'll remain within the same drawing and then edit them over there. But again, I would rather you open up that drawing somewhere else so that there is a proper place where you are editing rather than just using a few tools. Maybe if you want to do the editing relatively quickly, you can do that. Let's move on to the next section. Working with viewports and annotation, or the annotative scale, essentially. Okay, so viewports, we have discussed these multiple times previously as well, but we saw that, yeah, but we saw that, there is the option of having these, like I can have multiple viewports within the model space, and I can have multiple viewports within the paper space as well. So we see that this is what one viewport looks like. Once I select it in the properties, I can see that it is indeed a viewport. I can also select this viewport. And yeah, remember that the paper space is just there. Like you can add in however many viewports that you want. And you can sort of customize how each viewport looks like as well. So what I've done over here is you'll see that there are grid lines behind this viewport, but then there aren't any grid lines behind this viewport. So, the way you go about doing that is once you can double click inside any viewport, and that allows you to kind of maybe zoom in, maybe zoom out, kind of pan across your painting. Maybe you want to select something, you're able to edit like things using this as well. Again, not something I'd recommend, but something that is there. I would say that once you have set up the way you want your output to look like, let's say I want it to be 1:5. Okay, maybe a bit less, maybe 1:4. Um, a good thing is what I should be doing is I should be locking it up. So what does locking do? Locking, see how now I can't pan across this viewport. So even if I select it again, I can't pan or zoom in within this viewport. And that allows you to, stop those accidental, maybe misclicks, maybe You accidentally zoomed in and then you kind of like, since if I unlock this, if I zoom in even once, it messes up this entire annotative scale. And that might be important for your drawing, depending on what you're doing. Or maybe, I don't want, once I've fixed a certain area, I don't want that to change. And that is where the locking ability comes in. You can also freeze layers in your drawings. So the way I think we demonstrated this within last week, in last week's session, the third session essentially. So I'm not going to go over that, but the idea is that you can open up the Explorer for layers and be able to right click on a certain layer, and then you can freeze it for all viewports. Maybe you can freeze it for all viewports besides, maybe you want to freeze it for all viewports besides the current one. Again, depending on what your setup is, um, this feature might be useful. Using annotative text styles in your drawings. So what does the annotative scale do? Well, the idea of it is, let's say I have a drawing that is really big, you know, maybe I don't want the text to be, um, the drawing is really big. Maybe think of it as a very big office space. There are bathroom cubicles, there are desks, there are, a bunch of rooms maybe. And I want to set out the dimensions for individual rooms. So I want to set out the dimensions for desks, and I want to set out the dimension for the entire building as well, or I guess for the entire office space. Well, in order for that to take place, I'm gonna be, let's say if this is the office space, for example, just as an example. Sometimes I'm gonna be zooming into very specific areas. Sometimes I'm gonna be zooming out into much larger areas, and etc., etc. And the issue is right now, let's say I zoom in to this circle. Now the dimensions over here are unnecessarily big. They aren't providing me any additional information by being this big. Or, over here, now I can't really read anything. And the same is the issue with the paper space is if I um, focus over here, if I zoom in, the dimensions are way too big. And if I zoom out, the dimensions are way too small. So this is where this annotative feature comes in use. And, all that you have to do is enable the annotation buttons, the annotative buttons that we saw for, let's say if you want the text to be annotative, what's going to happen is essentially this. So this is an annotative text, and clicking it shows me all the scales that it has. And these two buttons are important for that. With the annotation visibility, depending on what scale you have set, it might show you the text, it might not show you the text. So for example, this text over here, we see that it is annotative, yes, and then there is this annotation scale. And if I click over here, if I click, in these three dots that we saw, we see the scale list. Now, what does this scale list tell us? It says that we'll only show this annotation if this 1-to-1 scale is there or this 1-to-2 scale is there. We also see that there is this button called automatic annotation. What this does is for this text, it will automatically add in, let's say I select 1:4, a 1/4. It will automatically add that to the scale list if I have this enabled. So I intentionally don't have it enabled right now to demonstrate to you what I'm trying to say. And the idea is if I do 1:2, you see how this text readjusted itself. And the same goes for this paper space. So, or I guess the top one will be a better demonstration. Well, but for example, right now it's 1:4. I might do, oh, sorry. Right now it is 1:4. I might do 1:2, or I might do 1:1. So yeah, we saw how the text kind of readjusted itself to this bigger scale, depending on what scale I selected in that case. Oh, right now it requires a region. I don't want to do that, but that is fine. We understand that if I do 1:1, it's going to become a bit smaller, and yeah, the same, like it's going to apply for every kind of viewport. So yes, if I change this, if I go ahead, click over here, and if I set this to maybe 1:5, we see that this text disappeared. Now, why did that happen? That is because I disabled this annotation visibility. And since in this current viewport, we have 1:5 selected, and this the text that disappeared while it was annotating only had 1:1 and 1:2 as the options. Um, the current scale, since it's 1:5, it's not going to be supported by that text. So that text completely disappears. And why can this be useful? Well, maybe if I am, zooming in quite a lot, I don't want certain texts to be there. Maybe the bigger dimensions, let's say for the entire office space, I don't want them to be there if I am zooming in into a particular table, for example. So I'm gonna program the dimension such that I don't support these smaller scales that I'm gonna be working with. Similarly, if I have the overall office space over here, I'm probably not interested in like particular very specific dimension. Let's say if this is a table, I'm not interested in the dimension of this table when I'm looking at um, this entire drawing. So maybe over here, when I'm looking at this entire drawing, I don't want these dimensions to show up. And this is where, again, annotative scales can help because, those will automatically be hidden depending on what scale you have selected over here. So you can have one viewport which has only the outside scales being shown, and then you can have another viewport where only these are being shown. And yeah, I mean, it's a very helpful tool and it ensures that your drawings make sense. I'll show you that if I enable um, what's it called, the automatic annotation. If I change the scale to 1:5, we see that the text itself also changes according to that scale. And now if we select this text and if I select this, we see that 1:5 got added to it automatically. So be careful of this because you may want to add the text, you may not want to add the text. So it depends on the way you want it to be. You may want to add the scale, you may not want to add the scale. So it depends on the way you want it to be used. The exact same applies for dimensions, where once a dimension is annotative, and that is what I've been discussing right now. It's not particular to a specific text, but it also applies to tables. It also applies to text. It also applies to dimensions as well as multi-leaders. Basically, any form of um, words that we enter or we use a language anywhere, we should be able to make it annotated. And an important tool that you're probably going to be using quite often. The last one, this is sort of the last chapter. Um, Quite simple, I would say. But the idea is that once you've drawn something, you probably want to put it in the paper space and output it. Maybe as a PDF, maybe you want to print it, maybe you want to plot it, whatever. Well, there's only 2, 3 slides left, so that is good. We can go slowly with this. Ideally, what you want to do is, or what I do is, I create a title block within the model space. So quite a popular thing to do. But all that this does is, as you see over here, it's like a space where, and right now I've only put in the word ID, but obviously you're gonna have more things rather than just the ID. But what it does is it essentially gives you a space or it gives you a block. You'll see that this is a block reference, and that block can be used within the paper space. So I've tried being careful where I know the dimensions of the space, and we see that this block is being used, yeah, over here. So you see how there is this block reference. This is, the title block, the block that we've drawn over here. So I've been careful to use the appropriate measurements. You can increase or decrease it, and then once you are inserting it, you can scale it up or down. But the idea is quite simple, where this entire block, I can go ahead and, for example, oh, I can go ahead and then this is a viewport that gets added automatically. I don't want it there right now. I can click on insert, and it allows me to select maybe the title block. Okay, both are doing the same thing. I'll just add this one, scale factor of one, and allows me to add in this block. Depending on like if I drew the block a bit bigger, I would have had to rescale it. But there are other ways of doing that rescaling automatically as well, as we'll see right now with the page setup. So what is this page setup? Well, a page setup allows you to kind of define maybe the way you want your layers to look like, maybe like in your output file or in your output, whatever in your printer output. So it allows you to kind of add some basic setup for each layout that you have so that you don't have to constantly redefine it. And the way to do that is quite simple. Go to the output tab and you can see page setup manager over here. You can also, if you want, you can use dynamic input. If you type in page setup, this will open up and we see it shows us what the current layout is. We can select different setups and set it as the current one for this page. And then we can, create new ones if you want to. Let's say this is just for so that I can show you what it contains. But the idea is, let's say I want this to be into PDF, for example. It'll show us an appropriate location. Maybe I want to change the paper size. I can do that over here. I can adjust the print scale. So if um, right now I think the drawing that I've done is in meters, and then this is in millimeters. So what I've done is I've done a scale of 1 to 1, where 1 meter corresponds to 1 millimeter. So hence why this fits in very nicely with I technically the width is 300 or something meters, but because of the scaling, it fits in very nicely with this whole with this paper space. There is also the option of previewing something. So maybe I want to change this. Maybe I want this to be extents. Maybe I'll say fit to paper. If I say preview, we see that it looks a bit different than what we have, and that is because it's kind of stretched out these edges a little bit to fit that space. And we see that the units over here changed a little bit as well. So depending on what you want, I generally just stick with layout, and then I define the scale manually myself so that I know what's going on. If I let it be with extents or with window or with something else, it's going to be a bit different, and I don't want that. This is where you can, you know, choose a few other options for what kind of style you want for, I believe, the layers. There are a few other options that you have about the orientation. So right now it is the landscape. That is the way I do it. And once you've um, finalized all these settings, you can preview it to see what it looks like. That is the purpose. And then once you click OK, and you can apply it, and then it will be applied, and then you can add in, if you want to add in a viewport, you can do that. I'm just typing in viewports, which is the shortcut, not shortcut, sorry, the dynamic input command. And then I can add in my drawings over here. Maybe I want this to be like this, and maybe I don't want this edge being shown, so that is fine. Maybe I want to, um, oh, sorry. Maybe I want to disable the grid so that it looks like this. So, it really depends on what kind of structure you want for your page. Or once you have that page set up, then you can go ahead, insert this block, and then a title block, and you can create it within this model space. And then go ahead inserting whatever viewports, and you can insert, of course, um, sorry, insert text over here. You can insert tables if you want to insert tables. A lot of the time people will do that where they might insert, let's say, some multi-line text saying that, oh, take a note of this and this and this, or the units used are this, that, whatever. So important to keep that in mind. Let's go back to the, yeah, once we click on print, there is also dynamic command to see the preview. So uh, see how, yeah, I typed in P preview and it showed me a preview of what this would look like. And finally, you can click print from the preview itself. There is also the option of print within the output section, or you can type in P preview and then we will see this print button over here. And yeah, that is how you, I mean, move your painting from this paper space to an actual maybe PDF, maybe, you know, right now, maybe, sorry, maybe you wanted to go to a PDF, maybe you wanted to go to a different printer, or maybe you want it to be something else. So that is about it from my end, I would say. Oh, of course. One thing left is, it doesn't always have to be a PDF. It can be other things. It can be actually a lot of file formats, and all of these are sort of provided over here. You can, depending on what your use case is, you can, you can explore this within the software itself. So just make sure to save up everything. I've done that right now, and I believe that should be it. So thank you for attending these 4 sessions. Hopefully they were helpful. Hopefully you learned something new using the training material that we've gone through. It's about 110 slides, and quite a few hours of work that all of us have done. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can send them in the chat right now. If you have any concerns, you can email us, email TTS, and we'll be happy to help you out. If you are interested in this software, you can again reach out to us. And yeah, I'll stick around for a few minutes so that I can answer any questions that you have, or if you want to discuss anything, I'll be here for a few minutes. So please go ahead.